Do you agree with your Cabinet colleague Penny Mordaunt that the Prime Minister's failure to attend the full D-Day itinerary was, quote, completely wrong?
It was certainly a mistake, and the Prime Minister has said that, and he has, of course, apologised unequivocally. He's used those words, "I am sorry," to make it clear how he feels about things. I know him well enough to know that he will be feeling all these things very deeply because he's an intensely patriotic person, and I've seen that, for example, at the Cabinet table, where we have, at his behest, a Cabinet Minister specifically to look after veterans. That's Johnny Mercer. We are pledging to enshrine in legislation in the next Parliament, if we're successful in this general election, the kind of support that we're providing for veterans, whether it's housing or mental health, healthcare, and so on. He feels very strongly about these things. A mistake was made, and of course he has put his hands up. He hasn't run away from this, and he has apologised.
But can you understand why it could be that someone listening to this, might have reason to doubt that patriotism or doubt that care towards veterans, when the Sunday Times is reporting that he came back to attend a meeting about the general election? How can the Prime Minister really believe that it was more important to attend that meeting than represent our country at the D-Day 80th anniversary commemoration, the last time any of those veterans will be there?
So the Prime Minister attended the events in Portsmouth, he attended all the British-led events in Normandy, and of course he met many veterans, many of those who you're describing.
But he wasn't
here.
there at the international
It is the case.
part.
He wasn't there at the
representing
international
us.
part. That is true, and for that, of course, he accepts a mistake was made, and he has apologised deeply and meaningfully for that. But look, this is a man who really cares.
Secretary of State, the King was there. The King has
I know
cancer.
that.
The King has cancer, and he
Yes.
made it, but the Prime Minister thought it was more important to attend a general election meeting.
So, as I say, he accepts that a mistake was made. He was there for the events in Portsmouth. He was there in Normandy. He did meet a lot of the veterans. He attended all of those events that were hosted by the British as part of that commemoration. Look, Rishi Sunak is a man I've known for some years now, and I've watched him very closely across that period. When he was Chancellor, he cared deeply about the well-being of men and women up and down our country. He brought in the furlough scheme. He avoided what could have been millions of people being unemployed at that point as a result of COVID.
What's that got to do with this?
Because he cares about his country, and some people have cast various, and you've made these suggestions in this interview, about character. His character is one of public service. His character, as I've said, around the Cabinet table, you have Johnny Mercer, who's specifically there to speak up for veterans. We've brought in all sorts of things to assist veterans, and these are signs, a clear indication of a Prime Minister who cares deeply about veterans' issues and is a deeply patriotic person. However, he does accept that he made a mistake, and he has fully and very clearly apologised for that.
Nigel Farage, I mean, you've referred to it, I've referred to it, has said that this means the Prime Minister is not patriotic. Now, some have condemned that line of attack, suggesting that it's othering the Prime Minister. Some have suggested as well that it's a sort of dog whistle attack. Would you agree?
I think it's an inappropriate thing to say for the reasons that I've given. Rishi Sunak is a deeply patriotic person for the reasons I've given. He has stood up for our veterans. He's made sure that they have cabinet representation at the highest level in government. I have, but you're asking me the same question.
But the symbolism matters. No, it's a different question. I asked you what you thought specifically of Farage's attack. You said it's inappropriate. Are you saying it's inappropriate because of the Prime Minister's actions or because of the content of what he's saying? Would you agree that it's
I don't
illegitimate
accept.
attack?
It is the same question with respect, because what you're saying is Nigel Farage has said what you've been saying to me in your earlier questions, which is suggesting that the Prime Minister is unpatriotic, and I'm saying that is just.
Do you think it's a dog whistle attack?
You'd have to ask Nigel Farage. I'm not going to get into
but you must have a view
of everything that Nigel Farage may or may not say around those kind of issues. But I just do strongly refute this idea in any way that the Prime Minister is anything other than thoroughly patriotic and on the side of veterans.
Have you spoken to the Prime Minister, Secretary of State, about this? What's his mood?
No, I haven't had an opportunity to speak to him specifically on this, but knowing him well, I would imagine he's probably been significantly. He will have taken this very deeply, because he cares very strongly about these very issues, recognises he's made a mistake, and as I say, has very clearly apologised for that. Now, he hasn't just, thrown his hands up and run away. He has faced up to this. He has apologised. He's recognised that it's a mistake. But I would say judge our Prime Minister on the things that he's done around the cabinet table, his support for veterans, his clear sense of duty that he has to our country, and knowing him as I do, I know that is a very strong element that's right at the core of who he is.
Nadine Dorries, the former Secretary Cabinet Minister, of course, has said there are rumours the Prime Minister might resign before the general election. Will the PM definitely still be in office and leader of the Conservative Party on polling day?
Yes.
There's a story also in the Sunday papers today suggesting the Prime Minister's media appearances will be scaled back in favour of Cabinet colleagues. Is that true?
I've no idea. I don't control the media schedule or the grid.
But you would think that would be a mistake?
Well, I'm not going to get into how much exposure individual ministers should have across the rest of the campaign, but I've no doubt that the Prime Minister, as he has done already, will continue to feature very prominently.
I thought the Secretary of State, look, he's always a spirited defender of the Prime Minister, probably the best defender of the PM that he's got, but even he, I thought, sounded at times a little defeated.
Well, absolutely. But he's got to come out on a Sunday morning and defend Rishi Sunak missing a portion of the D-Day anniversary. And that's what he's got to do with his Sunday morning. So I'm not particularly surprised. But he was, he came out, fair to say, swinging. He said it was certainly a mistake. Rishi Sunak will be feeling this very deeply, although he said he hasn't spoken to him personally. But the thing I thought was most astonishing was you asking him, rightly, because it was in the Sunday paper and it's what people are talking about, but asking him whether Rishi Sunak is going to resign or whether Rishi Sunak is still going to be leader at the general election. We were just talking about this off air, but I don't think that has ever happened before.
I can't think of an exact parallel now.
No, so it's just absolutely astonishing that we are having this conversation, and Rishi Sunak has had a terrible week. There's been several bad things that have happened. Farage saying that he's going to stand in Clacton-on-Sea, Rishi Sunak missing this D-Day commemoration. But it's also just been a bad campaign. The whole thing, if you think about the context of it, is Rishi Sunak came out and announced this election in the pouring rain. And there have been moments that have sort of been better for him, but it's just felt like thing after thing after thing for the Tories.
It's made Theresa May's 2017 campaign look Rolls-Royce, hasn't it?
Well, exactly. Someone was comparing, I was speaking to Lee Anderson this week, the only kind of Reform MPs running to be a Reform MP in Rashfield, and he was comparing this D-Day moment to Theresa May's dementia tax moment. I know it's been compared to other bad moments, but at least in that, Theresa May was doing well before that moment. When she went in, she was 17 points ahead in the polls. This is just another bad thing that's happening.
And it was a point of policy. You can have an argument about that. In the end, she had to resign from it. But, there are plenty of people who would say that at least she was trying to do something with regards to social care. This wasn't policy. This was optics and judgment. And to end up in a position where, as I was saying at the start of the show, it's hard to think, isn't it, of what could have been better calibrated to irritate the very voters that you're going after. What's next? What could be next? Seriously.
What could be next? But that's the thing, right? The biggest the biggest policy they've announced in this election was the national service, and it's these exact voters who are going to be really cross about the D-Day commemoration. So it's just astonishing that this happened. And also, if you think about it, there was a good moment earlier in the week. Rishi Sunak managed to get this tax line, which has been discredited since, but managed to get this tax line said over and over again in an ITV debate.
He did all right in the debate.
He did all right. Apparently he came out and everyone's applauded. His Tory advisors applauded him. But then this has happened, and it just seems. The thing that I find amazing is there's reporting this morning that he didn't see this coming and their advisors didn't see this coming.
That is what I find astounding.
He went into this, he did a broadcast interview when he came back to the country. And after the broadcast interview, his advisors were concerned about, the robust questioning on tax and, him being rich himself. And they were not concerned about the fact that he just skipped out of this event early and Keir Starmer had been there having these photo ops. It just seems to have completely blindsided them. And that I just think is astonishing, really.
Where do you think this leaves him with the Conservative Party now? We've still got, 3.5 weeks of the campaign to go. What's your sense of how Conservative MPs are going to react? In a sense, the fact that it is a campaign means that, weirdly enough, the internal criticism of him is probably more muted, at least publicly, than it would otherwise be.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that's something that people have been saying. If this had happened outside of an election, then letters would go in from Tory colleagues and he would have been finished. He would have had to resign over it. So at least the fact that it's in an election campaign means, that is at least not happening and it is more muted. But you had Penny Mordaunt, a cabinet minister, doing a debate earlier in the week, 3 different times saying this is really wrong. Mel Stride is coming out and saying clearly this is a mistake. Those are sort of, at least on paper, allies of the Prime Minister. And it is more muted. But Tory MPs are absolutely furious. They are so cross. And you are now having conversations, especially the smaller parties are just openly saying, well, Labour is going to win this election. We've got 3.5 weeks left. Nigel Farage is saying Labour are going to win this election. But I just heard Amber Rudd, former Home Secretary, saying as well, Labour are going to win this election. It feels like a done deal. And that means what's happening at the moment is there's a lot more sort of manoeuvrings going on within Tory parties and conversations. And, as you asked Mel Stride, what will happen to the Tory party after the election? Will, for example, Farage be invited to return to the Tory party? And those are the conversations being had. And it's almost like it's a foregone conclusion, even though there are 3.5 weeks left.
At heart, Aggie, is not obviously the D-Day just fiasco is terrible and appalling, and it is going to linger, and it is likely, I think, to become the defining moment of the campaign, or at least one of them. At heart, though, is what happened on Monday and Tuesday in terms of Farage getting back into the game. And the two things are linked because it's played into Farage's hands. But fundamentally, this was a campaign predicated strategically on the idea that Farage wasn't going to be around, that you could close the gap by bearing down on the Reform Party polling, by things like National Service going quite hard, sort of hard right on sort of classic Conservative Party issues. And thereby you could at least close the gap. The fact of the matter is now he's back in the game. The biggest problem of all with this campaign is strategically, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle him, and they don't know how to handle that question. And the campaign up to now, as it has been the strategy, is just in tatters.
I think that's right. It feels like they don't really have anywhere to go with the strategy they've chosen. And they've had a few different, we saw reset after reset after reset with Rishi Sunak before this election was called. And this was the sort of strategy they chose upon for the election. And as you say, now Nigel Farage is back in the game. And their argument is a vote for reform is going to let Keir Starmer into Downing Street. And I'm just not convinced that's landing, especially because the response from people like Farage now is, well, yeah, but look what the Tories have done. We want to be the official opposition. Yeah. We want to replace the centre-right.
That shows them, even if it's just one poll that they can point to that shows reform in the next week actually overtaking the Tories, which, given that they are literally neck and neck or nip and tuck, is not incredible, then they can actually say a vote for the Conservatives is a wasted vote.
Well, I honestly can't believe that sentence just left your mouth, but that is genuinely where we are in the campaign. And that is absolutely astonishing. And that is something, that crossover moment is being talked about. Conservative advisors think that's going to happen. Reform certainly think that's going to happen. I spent some time in Ashfield's constituency this week. I spoke to probably 20 different voters on the high street. Not one person told me they were definitely going to vote for Conservative. There were a few undecided, but mostly it was Labour and Reform. And those people, the majority of those people have voted in a Conservative MP at the last general election.